Along the Stuart Highway, south of Alice Springs and west of Wallaby Rock, Sundown Station, once a bustling cattle outpost in the remote South Australian outback, now lies abandoned, its weather-beaten buildings slowly surrendering to the elements. Surrounded by vast stretches of red earth and saltbush, the station was once a hub of activity where workers braved blistering heat, scarce water and crushing isolation to manage livestock and survive the land's relentless demands. Life here was never easy. Venomous snakes, dust storms, and the ever-present threat of dehydration or mechanical failure made every day a test of endurance. With supply runs infrequent and medical help hours away, residents relied on grit and resourcefulness. But as the challenges mounted and rural industries declined, Sundown Station was eventually deserted, leaving behind rusting equipment, silent windmills, and a haunting reminder of how unforgiving and magnificent the outback can be. In late 1957, Hubert, Nigel, Pete Bowman and Thyra Sally Bowman were running Glen Helen Station in the Northern Territory with their daughters, Wendy and Marion. That November, a 22-year-old family friend, Thomas Whelan, travelled north to visit them during his holiday. When it came time for Thomas to return south to Adelaide, the Bowmans decided to accompany him part of the way by car, stopping in Alice Springs on December 4th. From there, Pete and Marion boarded a flight to Adelaide, while Sally, Wendy and Thomas continued the journey by road, bringing along 2 family dogs and 85 Australian dollars in cash. The trio was last seen at Coolgorra Homestead, just north of the South Australian border, where they bought fuel before heading further south. When they failed to arrive in Adelaide or make contact within 3 days, concerns mounted, prompting a search effort. On December 13th, an RAAF Lincoln bomber from Woomera spotted their car abandoned beneath a stand of trees at the long-deserted Sundown Station, roughly 40 miles south of Coolgorra, an eerie and remote location that offered no further clues as to the fate of its passengers. Hours after the abandoned car was spotted from the air, Aboriginal trackers reached the remote site and made a grim discovery: the bodies of all 3 missing travellers. Each had suffered blunt force injuries to the head before being fatally shot. The bodies of Sally, Wendy and Thomas were discovered approximately a mile from the abandoned car, concealed beneath blankets and canvas. The grim find came after Noel Coulthard, the son of Coolgorra Station's manager, noticed suspicious tyre tracks while riding his motorcycle through the area. Nearby, the trackers identified the location where the perpetrator had parked their own vehicle, noting distinct tracks that indicated it had been towing a 2-wheeled trailer. Early witness reports described seeing a grey Ford Zephyr with a green trailer heading north towards Alice Springs around the time of the murders. That same vehicle was later reported near Tennant Creek, further deepening suspicions. Local police from Finke, along with the skilled Aboriginal trackers, played a crucial role in piecing together the early stages of the investigation. The investigation became a joint effort between Northern Territory and South Australian police. From the outset, South Australian Homicide Squad detectives Charles Hopkins and Kevin Moran were assigned to the case, working under Detective Inspector Gil Gully. They made the long journey to the remote crime scene, just inside the South Australian border, by Holden sedan, accompanied by 2 Port Augusta detectives in a Ford 1-ton utility. The trip took 30 arduous hours over rough terrain. Support came from officers stationed at Oodnadatta and Finke, local community members, and 6 skilled Aboriginal trackers from nearby stations, whose expertise proved invaluable in navigating the harsh and isolated landscape. The investigation eventually identified Raymond John Bailey as the prime suspect in what came to be known as the Sundown murders. Born in Gilgandra on December 3rd, 1932, Bailey was one of 6 children. He left school at the age of 14 and began working as a carpenter before taking on various jobs as an itinerant labourer. He married young and by late 1957 was travelling through the outback with his wife and young son in a black 1938 DeSoto sedan towing a caravan. In September of that year, he had acquired the vehicle in Renmark and took possession of a rifle in Wirrala, one he had agreed to buy but never paid for. Bailey was heading north, telling fellow travellers along the Alice Springs Road that he was searching for work. His journey eventually led him to Mount Isa in Queensland, where he secured temporary employment at the local hospital. It was there, in January 1958, that authorities caught up with him. Initially arrested on charges of false pretences involving a motor vehicle and possession of an unlicensed firearm, Bailey was formally charged with the murder of Sally and Wendy Bowman and Thomas Whelan just 2 days later. He was subsequently extradited to Adelaide to stand trial for the brutal triple killings at Sundown Station. In September 1957, while working in the Wirrala area of South Australia, Raymond John Bailey became acquainted with David Isles. The two men developed a casual friendship and went rabbit shooting together during their time there. Isles later agreed to sell Bailey his Huntsman rifle, but Bailey abruptly left town without paying for it. When news of the Sundown murders broke, Isles led a constable to the area where they had previously used the rifle. There, the officer recovered spent cartridge cases, which forensic analysis later confirmed matched those found at the murder scene. At the trial, Bailey told his version of events. According to Bailey, he was driving his car with an attached caravan along the north-south road towards Alice Springs when he saw a Vanguard sedan halted by the side of the road. He stated a campfire was burning near the vehicle, and at this point, a middle-aged woman and a young man approached him, with a young teenage girl remaining by the campfire. He said he parked a further quarter-mile away, and both he and his wife, who had accompanied him, went to bed. At approximately 10 p.m, Bailey left his car with his single-shot hunting rifle and wandered towards the campfire. In a chilling statement, 24-year-old Bailey described the sequence of events that led to the brutal killings. He claimed he was walking through the family's camp when he heard a noise behind him, what he believed was a dog growling. Startled, he turned and fired his rifle. At that moment, one of the victims, a man, suddenly stood up, cried out and collapsed, prompting Bailey to believe he had fatally shot him. In his words, he, quote, just went mad after that. Bailey said that upon believing he had already killed one person, he panicked and felt compelled to kill the others to cover up the act. As the woman and the young girl rushed towards him, he reloaded and shot the older woman first and then the girl. Both, he said, fell immediately after being hit. He admitted he didn't know how many times he fired, only that he'd lost control. After the shootings, Bailey stated he placed all 3 bodies in the family's Vanguard car, covering them with whatever blankets, canvas, and belongings he could gather from the campsite. He then drove the vehicle into the scrubland across the road, removed the bodies and laid them out together, concealing them once more under the same coverings. According to his statement, after the killings, Bailey returned to his own car and caravan, where he took a bath and went to bed. When his wife questioned his whereabouts, he claimed he had been feeling unwell. The following morning, he went back to the scene of the murders and found the 2 family dogs still tied to a tree. He shot them as well. Bailey confessed to discarding the rifle as he approached Alice Springs, attempting to eliminate evidence. He also admitted to taking a wallet from the male victim's pocket, removing between $20 and $25 in cash before throwing the wallet away somewhere between Tennant Creek and Mount Isa. The account, disturbing in its detail, painted a picture of a crime carried out in a state of panic and disarray, and further revealed a calculated effort to cover his tracks following the crime. Bailey was found guilty of the murders and was sentenced to death. In a final attempt to avoid execution, Bailey claimed he was not responsible for the Sundown murders. Instead, he alleged he had encountered the real killer at the scene and killed him in self-defense. This unexpected claim earned him a 1-week stay of execution, while authorities investigated his new version of events. The South Australian State Cabinet approved efforts to verify Bailey's statement, and a large contingent, comprised of 14 people, including police officers, Aboriginal trackers, lawyers and prison officials, was assembled to revisit the crime scene. Bailey was flown to Alice Springs and then driven south to the remote location at Sundown Station. According to his revised account, on the night of the murders, he stumbled upon an unknown man removing Mrs. Bowman's shoes. He said a violent struggle followed, during which he fatally stabbed the man. He then claimed to have buried the body roughly 4 miles, or 6.4 kilometres, north of where the Bowmans and Thomas Whelan were found. However, after 3.5 hours of intensive searching, no remains or evidence of the alleged killer were uncovered. Confronted with the failure to support his story, Bailey ended the effort with the words, quote, "I have nothing more to say." Bailey was executed by hanging at Adelaide Jail on the 24th of June 1958. His 2 brothers visited him the day before his execution, marking the final chapter in one of Australia's most haunting outback crimes. Investigative journalist and author Stephen Bishop has long challenged the official account of the Sundown murders, alleging serious flaws in the case against Raymond John Bailey. One of his most serious claims is that Detective Glenn Patrick Hallen provided false testimony and fabricated details in records of police interviews with Bailey. Bishop pointed out several inconsistencies, including the fact that the alleged murder weapon, said by Bailey to have been sold to a man near Coober Pedy before the killings, was never recovered. Further doubts were raised by contradictions between Bailey's signed confession and forensic evidence. Bailey stated he had shot all 3 victims as they fled from him, yet post-mortem reports showed the victims had been shot while unconscious and lying on the ground. During the trial, Bailey testified that he only signed the confession under emotional duress, claiming detectives told him they would stop tormenting his wife, whom he could hear crying in a nearby room, if he cooperated. Additional evidence raised questions about Bailey's guilt. A grey Ford Zephyr was spotted near the crime scene, while Bailey had been driving a black 1938 DeSoto. Moreover, footprints found at the scene, believed to belong to the killer, were estimated to be a size 7 or 8. Bailey, however, wore a size 5.5 shoe. In 2013, Bishop formally petitioned the Governor of South Australia, Kevin Scarce, requesting a posthumous pardon for Bailey. The appeal was ultimately rejected. The Sundown murders remain one of Australia's most haunting and controversial outback crimes. While police and prosecutors secured a conviction based on Raymond Bailey's confession and circumstantial evidence, serious doubts have lingered for decades. Inconsistencies between forensic findings and Bailey's statement, missing evidence, and claims of coercion and misconduct have continued to fuel debate. Despite efforts to reopen the case and seek a posthumous pardon, the official verdict stands, yet questions about the true events at Sundown Station remain unresolved.